This is Sky News at 12, the headlines. Italy's president faces impeachment calls as he rejects a Eurosceptic and appoints a new interim prime minister. We'll have the very latest live from Rome as the fallout from that discussion continues. A man dies in his car as torrential rain causes flash flooding on what could be the hottest day of the year so far. The real-life Spider-Man hailed a hero from rescuing a child dangling from a Paris balcony. The EU pledges to ban many single-use plastics by 2030. A mother's drugs warning after 2 people died at a music festival in Portsmouth. 9 months alone at sea, no problem. The sailor set to make double history in one of the world's toughest races. Very good afternoon to you. We've got some breaking news, and in the last half an hour, Italy's president has appointed former International Monetary Fund official Carlo Cottarelli as interim prime minister. Mr. Cottarelli was summoned to the presidential palace a short while ago by President Sergio Mattarella and invited him to form a government of technocrats. Well, it comes a day after Mr. Mattarella vetoed the nomination of Eurosceptic Paolo Savona as finance minister. That move effectively ended plans by 2 anti-establishment parties to form a coalition government, and the president is now facing calls for impeachment while early elections look inevitable.
A dialogue with Europe in defence of our interests is essential in the Eurozone.
Well, our Europe correspondent Mark Stone is in Brussels for us now. Mark, just bring us up to date with the very latest there.
It's hard to keep up with Italian politics at the best of times. This is unprecedented. It is, I think, the most uncertain time for Italian politics than they did in the last election back in March.
And Mark, obviously Italy, I think it's what, the 3rd largest country in the Eurozone, so it holds huge sway. What implications does this have for the European Union?
It's the 3rd largest country in the Eurozone. It's the 3rd largest economy, I should say, in the Eurozone, the 5th largest economy in the EU as a whole. All into what we've just discussed about populists being seen to be blocked by the establishment. This is looking pretty dangerous politically for Italy right now.
OK, Mark, thank you. We'll stay across that and come back to you a bit later on. A migrant from Mali has been hailed a hero after he scaled the front of a building in Paris to rescue a child hanging from a 4th-floor balcony. Well, President Macron has awarded him with a medal and full French citizenship for his bravery. Sky's Phil Edwards has the latest.
It was an act of true heroism. Mamoudou Gassama had been with friends in a restaurant on Saturday night when he heard a commotion outside and went to investigate. Quickly realising time was fast running out for a child in peril, he leapt literally into action. The emergency services had been called, but Mr. Gassama was not about to wait for them to arrive. He's been called the Spider-Man of the 18th, referring to this particular district in the northern suburbs of the city, and it's easy to see why. Showing great athleticism, he managed to haul himself up to a position where he was able to pluck the 4-year-old boy to safety. Suspicion of leaving a child unattended, a child who was very lucky that Mamoudou Gassama happened to be passing at just the right time to save his life. Phil Edwards, Sky News.
A man has died after his car was caught in floodwater in Walsall. Torrential rain has caused flash flooding across large parts of the West Midlands. Well, Sky's Fraser Maud is in Selly Oak in Birmingham for us now. As we were hearing there, Fraser, the weather has been horrendous there and had huge implications.
It has. I mean, it didn't rain for very long here. It didn't have to. In just over an hour or so, over 2 inches of rain fell in this part of Birmingham, causing extreme flash flooding. 900 calls, more than 900 calls into West Midlands Fire and Rescue Service for people needing help. They're looking at a year, perhaps even 18 months out of their properties because they've flooded for the 3rd time in 9 years now.
Okay, Fraser, thank you. Well, let's take a look at some of the day's other news stories now. And a second person who died after falling ill at the Mutiny Music Festival in Portsmouth has been named as Tommy Cowan. He's been described as a caring young father. Both he and 18-year-old Georgia Jones were admitted to the Queen Alexandra Hospital on Saturday night and later died. The organisers issued a warning of a high strength or bad batch of drugs before deciding to cancel the festival's second day. A man's been arrested on suspicion of murder after the bodies of a 31-year-old woman and 11-year-old girl were found in Gloucester. Officers were called to Dexter Way in the early hours of this morning, and both the women and girl were declared dead at the scene. Police have asked anyone with information to come forward. A man's been beaten with bats and pickaxe handles in an attack police have described as inhuman. It happened in the early hours of this morning during a burglary at a house in Larne in County Antrim. Officers say the victim was attacked in front of a woman and young children. Let's get more now on our top story and the turmoil in Italian politics after the country's president refused to appoint a Eurosceptic finance minister and choose a technocrat as the interim prime minister instead. Well, I think we can go live to Rome now, and James Ippoliti, the Rome bureau chief for the Fine FT. Very good afternoon to you. It is extraordinary events in Italy at the moment. We know that Italian politics can often be very volatile, but this is out of the ordinary, isn't it?
Yes, it's absolutely been extraordinary. They've taken sort of the drama around Italian politics to a completely new level. It looked as if we were on the verge of seeing a sort of populist Eurosceptic government coming to power, but it sort of fell at the final hurdle when the two parties leading the coalition presented a list of ministers to the president. And the president said, no, I don't want that finance minister from who has held anti-Euro views in the past. And then they just said, okay, well, then we're not going to move ahead. And now the president has been forced to appoint a technocratic caretaker to take over in the interim.
And what do you make of Carlo Cottarelli, who has now been given this mandate and will become the new prime minister?
Well, he's certainly very well respected. He's spent many years at the IMF in Washington. He's considered a very able sort of steward of public finances and a very good economist. And I think he is relatively politically neutral, so that will play to his favor. But certainly, he's unlikely to get a majority in Parliament. For his platform, and so he's heading into this with most of sort of the Italian political system against him, actually, and he won't be sort of fully empowered to make any major decisions. So he faces a tough challenge, and as we see today, there's quite a bit of skepticism in the markets about his ability to sort of steady the Italian ship, and he'll have to overcome that, and it won't be easy.
Of course, Italy is the third largest economy in the Eurozone. What kind of implications is this going to have further afield for the rest of Europe?
Well, I think to a certain extent it's already sort of stalled or brought some trouble to efforts by Emmanuel Macron and Angela Merkel to forge more integration to the Eurozone. Because if there are doubts about Italy's commitment to the single currency and its ability to implement reforms, then that really hampers the ability of to move ahead. So I think it's already casting a cloud over the EU as a whole, and I think it could be the one of the biggest sources of trouble for Brussels in the coming years.
And of course, now early elections seem almost inevitable.
Yeah, so Mr. Cottarelli said that assuming he didn't get a vote of confidence in Parliament, that the new general election would be held after August. So essentially we're looking at September or maybe October at the latest, which in itself would be unprecedented for Italy, because Italy is not, in its post-war Republican history, has not held an election in the second half of the year, or two elections in the same year. So we are really, we're really testing the limits of the Italian system here.
OK, appreciate your expertise from Rome. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Now, we've got a bit of breaking news to bring you now, and you'll remember that 2 people died at the Mutiny Music Festival in Portsmouth over the weekend. It meant that it was cancelled the day after, but we've now got the latest from Hampshire Police, and they are saying that arrests have been made following inquiries into this. Overnight, a 20-year-old man from Havant, a 20-year-old man from Waterlooville and a 22-year-old from Cosham have been arrested on suspicion of being concerned in the supply of Class A drugs. They're all currently in police custody, and the police saying yet again if they've got any information, anyone with information should come forward and contact them. But that's the latest. Those 3 arrests have been made. And we'll have more coming up after the break.
80 to give £3 and help save a child's life.
Welcome back. Let's get an update now on all the latest sports.
This programme is brought to you by Vitality Health and Life Insurance.
Sorry, I just can't help myself.
Getting active brings its own rewards.
It's in the genes.
Good afternoon. British tennis player Cameron Norrie has won his first ever match at the French Open. There's more ahead of the League Two playoff final, live now on Sky Sports News, and we're back later this hour.
And that's the end of the show. I'm off for a biscuit. Anyone fancy?
Now it's supposed to be a scorcher of a day. Let's see how the weather's looking.
By the springtime flowers of a mountain lake, to the first snowfall on a winter's day.
Many places will be dry and sunny, but there will be a few thunderstorms in the south, whilst low cloud will linger near some North Sea coasts. It'll be quite cool under the cloud, hot elsewhere, but there will be a scattering of showers in the south this afternoon. Some torrential rain with hail and thunder. South Wales, southern England and East Anglia look most at risk, but the showers will become quite isolated later on. Most other places will be dry and plenty of sunshine, but it will stay rather grey near some eastern coasts, while Central Ireland and northwest England can expect the odd shower. Showers in the south will develop more widely across the west of Ireland this evening, but will largely die out later on, leaving most places dry. The southeast can expect further storms by the morning. Misty low clouds spreading in from the east will take over much of central and eastern Britain later on, giving a rather murky start to Tuesday. Tuesday will bring more storms to the south and more cloud to central and eastern Britain.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
You're watching Sky News. Coming up, as 2 more people die after taking pills at a festival, is it time to think about legalising drugs? This is Sky News, the top stories this hour. Italy's president is facing impeachment calls after he asked former IMF official Carlo Cottarelli to be the new country's prime minister. A man has died after his car got caught in flash flooding in Walsall. Torrential rain has affected large parts of the West Midlands on what's expected to be the hottest day of the year for many. A man who scaled a Paris building to rescue a child dangling from a balcony has been given honorary French citizenship. The 22-year-old, a migrant from Mali, met President Macron at the Élysée Palace. Now, the Health Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, says the gender pay gap between male and female NHS doctors is unacceptable, and he's now launched a review to help eliminate it. It follows research which shows that male doctors are paid on average £10,000 more than their female counterparts, as Sky's Olivia Kinsley now reports.
It takes many years of training and practice for doctors to make it to the top ranks of their profession. Kinsley, Sky News.
Well, let's bring you some more breaking news. And now the police investigating the death of 2 festival goers have made 3 arrests. Overnight, a 20-year-old man from Havant, a 20-year-old man from Waterlooville and a 22-year-old man from Cosham. They've all been arrested on suspicion of being concerned in the supply of Class A drugs. Well, the second day of the Mutiny Festival in Portsmouth was cancelled yesterday after those deaths. And an alert was issued on Saturday night warning of a high-strength or bad batch of drugs on the site. So does more need to be done to restrict the use of drugs, or is legalising drugs and regulating their quality the best way to limit harm? Well, I'm joined now by the founder of DrugFam, Elizabeth Burton-Phillips, and Steve Moore, the director of the drug police think tank, Volte-Face. Well, first of all, let's start with you, Elizabeth, if we can. Is it time then, simple question, that drugs are legalised?
Well, everybody has a different view on this, and I speak personally, and I can understand that it's very easy to jump to this opportunity and say let's legalise everything. But let's remember, alcohol is a legalised drug that has been destroying families for thousands and thousands of years, and we at DrugFam hear every day family members really having a terrible time because of the impact of substances on them, and in particular alcohol. So I'm not convinced that legalising drugs is a route forward. I do believe very much in education, starting with year 6 at primary school, educating young people about the risks, the actions and consequences that they take, because sadly for the families who are grieving today, it is all about the risk-taking and the not understanding actions and consequences.
OK, Steve, let's bring you in. Obviously, you're the director of Volte-Face. Do you agree with Elizabeth's point of view?
I agree to some extent. I think there is one of the things that comes with the government's current approach to drug policy is a lack of decent education. We have a particular and escalating problem around festivals and around nightclubs involving MDMA, and I think there is an issue about basically providing people with basic honest education, and that's certainly lacking in current government policy. Last year we had a look at the level of education provided to children in the last year of formal education, and they were receiving less than 1 hour of drugs education in the course of a year. I mean, that's just simply not enough.
Elizabeth, I suppose there's two different faces to drugs, aren't there? There's the type of drugs that are street drugs that are ingrained in society, things like heroin and crack cocaine, and then there's these party drugs that people are taking. But very often, would you say that it's those that are most vulnerable in society? They're the ones that are being sent to prison for offences. It's very rare that people who are taking it behind closed doors, perhaps middle-class people taking these party drugs, they often don't feel the full force of the law.
I think it's a fair point that you're making. However, I do not agree that there is anything as a party drug. All substances, whether they are drugs or alcohol, are dangerous, and you cannot predict that, whereas 2 young people have died just over the weekend, that, that can't happen to other people as well, or other people can safely use them. Everybody's body is different. I know from working 39 years in education that young people are willing to take risks, no matter how dangerous so-called party drugs, so-called hard drugs are. And it's all about the education, helping them to understand that, drug abuse and alcohol abuse is incredibly selfish. They do not understand the impact that it will have on the wider family, who will be impacted by the consequences of reckless actions. I think you've got to be full on and honest with people, young people, and constantly draw attention to the fact that they do cause deaths, and it can happen on a daily basis, and we hear that all the time.
Steve, I suppose very often drugs are used at things like festivals, raves, university days, I suppose. What is the way that, authorities can try and crack down and make sure that young people are safe? Are there any options open?
And there are options. I mean, there's a whole wide range of policy instruments that could be used, but are not at the moment. I mean, there are patchwork of really interesting experiments drawing on international experience, notably the work of the Loop social enterprise that is running drug testing services at festivals and nightclubs. I mean, this is a thing that should be upscaled. I mean, if we are to deal with this, I mean, I think that to Elizabeth, where I differ from Elizabeth is I think that there has been a manifest failure of trying to promote policies based on just saying no. There's a decades-long failure in terms of doing that. I think what we do need is to look at ways in which we can provide some of the modelling that we've used for alcohol. I mean, we've actually, in some ways, reduced some of the harms from alcohol by providing more education and more better treatment services. And I think that's the sort of thing that we need to start looking at. I think what we need is honest policy making in this space. And what honest policy making requires us to understand that young people are going to take drugs at these sort of events, and they are going to take those risks. And what we should be doing all the time is just limiting the dangers from those risks.
Yes, I think that it's really important to look at the impact of that advert that shows the impact of smoking on the lungs. And if you talk to young people, they will tell you that that visual impact of the damage and the cancers that can be caused by smoking on the television is a really impactful piece of information that makes you stop and think. And it's that kind of information that needs to be on, advertised in cinemas and on the TV and through the media, constantly reminding young people that, the choices that they make and the consequences from the actions that they take are there for them to face. And that kind of education needs to begin at year 6 in primary school.
Mm-hmm. And Steve, for the police, I mean, obviously drugs take up a huge amount of their resources. I suppose for the police, they want to get to the actual dealers themselves, not those taking the drugs. But very often, the only ones they can, get access to are these people that are being used as drugs mules, people that are very, very young. They can't get to the very top of the chain, the people that are making the money from these drugs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the principal arguments for decriminalisation, a policy that's been very successful in Portugal and is slowly being introduced in other territories. I think Norway in the next year, so it's going to move to a similar model where there's decriminalisation of possession of drugs, so the focus can be on the criminality associated with supply. I think that's one solution. Another solution that's emerging in North America in particular is regulation and legalisation of certain drugs. In the case of Canada and the US, that's cannabis. I took a group of MPs to the US last month to look at how that was playing out in Washington State. What's very clear there is some of the things that we're talking about here are now in place. Much more effective education, much more effective treatment services, all coming from and using the revenues generated from the taxation of sales in a regulated market. So I think there are a number of policy options. Again, in the context of this, there is the opportunity to really upscale the work of organisations like the Loop so that we have on-site testing facilities. At the moment, they're having to crowdfund with clubbers and to sort of raise funding for that. That should be a public health priority as we move forward into the summer.
Elizabeth, I just want to ask you, I'm very interested in terms of trends and drugs taking. Do you think it's changed over the years of what people are actually taking?
I think what we're seeing is we're hearing a lot more about ketamine, a lot more about MDMA, and I think that the evidence that we have as a charity, once again, is what it's doing to the family members. The people who are worried, very anxious as they watch loved ones, whether it's husbands, wives, children, whatever, teenagers, slowly slip into addiction and the impact that it's having all the time on the family. And that's something that we will always champion the cause of, the impact on the family at the end of the day. Look at the families this weekend that will be grieving, because of the tragedy of what has happened. So, we're hearing about spice. We're always, of course, hearing about the Class A drugs, but in particular, we're hearing an awful lot about ketamine and, psychosis as a result of skunk and cannabis and mental health issues.
OK, Elizabeth Burton-Phillips, Stephen Moore, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, let's take a look at some of the day's other stories now, shall we? And some highly toxic skin lightening products are still being bought in the United Kingdom, despite being both illegal and dangerous. Well, the local government association has issued a renewed warning against the products. The cosmetics contain banned ingredients such as mercury, which can cause cancer, severely damage internal organs and ruin people's long-term looks.
The penalties are large, a year in prison, up to £20,000 fine for every offence. So, we're saying to people it's absolutely not worth selling it, but also, it's not worth using these creams. If you think, there aren't ingredients listed on the side of the product, don't use it. If you're suspicious that it's a brand, but actually it's a lot cheaper than you would normally pay for it, be suspicious and don't use it.
The cryptocurrency markets work may still be a mystery to some of us, but now it seems some people are becoming so addicted to it that they need help. A Bitcoin treatment clinic has opened up in Peebleshire to treat crypto addicts, and it's believed to be the first of its kind. Some experts say it's similar to online gambling, with some users obsessively following the currency's highs and lows. Now, as ocean races go, the Golden Globes is one of the toughest, and when it last took place 50 years ago, just one man completed the 30,000-mile journey all around the world, with competitors are alone at sea for 9 months. But that hasn't deterred one 28-year-old woman who's set to become the youngest and the first female ever to take part. I went to meet her. She's attempting one of the greatest sailing challenges that there is. The Golden Globe race around the world last took place in 1968. Back then, just one man completed it. The rest either sunk, retired, or died. But now at just 28 years old, Susie Goodall is set to become the youngest and the only female competitor to ever take part.
I think most of the pressure, to be honest, I put on myself to do it. So I just want to complete it. And it's such a long time to be alone, and I haven't been alone for 9 months. And there's no rule book on how to be alone for that length of time. So I think actually the biggest unknown is just how will I react and how will I feel when I'm kind of in a really low place and I just want to go home.
The 30,000-mile solo non-stop race will take Susie around the world in 9 months. And what makes it even more challenging is that all modern technology is banned.
I like the celestial navigation side of it. That's kind of fun, but it's the music. We have to take cassette tapes, and I love music, so I'm really going to miss listening to music and audiobooks and that sort of thing. So this is basically going to be my home for 9 months on the race, going around the world. Just trying out different freeze-dried stuff, more tins, bits and pieces, so it's kind of a bit of a work in progress when it comes to the food.
Back in the 1960s, it was Sir Robert Knox Johnston who made history winning the Golden Globe race. But Donald Crowhurst also made headlines. Portrayed by Colin Firth in the film The Mercy, he delivered false coordinates so it looked as if he was performing well. But when things became too much, he went on to kill himself. A key part of Susie's 21st century journey will be to help research the impact that plastic's having on our oceans. She'll be taking samples using test tubes and a trawler net that'll be analysed when she gets back home. There's no doubt that this is an incredible feat, and it's likely to be just as much a mental challenge for Susie as a physical one. Rebecca Williams, Sky News on the Solent. You're watching Sky News. Coming up.
Yes, we've got the latest from the French Open tennis as Britain's Cameron Norris makes his debut and big...
Time for a check on the sport now.
Yes, good afternoon. British tennis player Cameron Norrie has won his first ever match at the French Open. He's through to the second round at Roland Garros after Peter Goroshek retired hurt. The German had a long medical timeout after Norrie won the first set 6-1. And there's more live now on Sky Sports News, and we're back in the next hour.
Now it's set to be a scorcher. Let's see how the weather's looking.
From warm, flowing island winds to an enchanting desert breeze.
Many places will be dry and sunny, I'm pleased to say, but there will be a few thunderstorms in the south, whilst low cloud will linger near some North Sea coasts. It will be quite cool under the cloud, hot elsewhere. There'll be a scattering of showers in the south this afternoon, some torrential rain with hail and thunder. South Wales, southern England and East Anglia look most at risk, but those showers will become quite isolated later on. Most other places will be dry with plenty of sunshine, but it will stay rather grey near some eastern coasts, while Central Ireland and northwest England can expect the odd shower. Showers in the south will develop more widely across the west of Ireland this evening, but will largely die out later, leaving most places dry. The southeast can expect further storms by morning, and misty low clouds spreading in from the east will take over much of the central belt.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.